Hello everyone and welcome to this video जहाँ पे मैं डिस्कस करूंगा एक hypothetical चीज. I am going to discuss why cat needs to change and if yes then what all changes am I anticipating should happen with the cat. Now cat as you know has adapted this format since 2015. Before that for some years it used to be a 2-section test but 2015 से लेके 2025 तक it has basically followed the same 3 timed sections pattern. But now I think there is a time when cat needs to change, cat needs to evolve and do something slightly differently because the fabric of aspirants has also changed over the last decade or so. Let's try to see why should it change first and then I'll suggest the changes. So first of all, you have to understand that cat basically is a test that we should be looking at your aptitude, and aptitude is something which ideally you should not be able to prepare for. Of course you can prepare some concepts, you can prepare maybe some strategies here and there, but you can't really prepare entirely in terms of aptitude. So you don't really need to prepare for say an IQ test. So that's basically what cat should be like. There should be some amount of uncertainty, there should be some amount of things that are present in the test which do not encourage thorough preparedness. It's basically like going for an interview where you already know what all questions can be asked, and so you are preparing for those 20 or 30 questions, and a random number generator will tell you which questions are the ones that you are supposed to answer, and फिर उनको answer देना पड़ेगा. Now CAT is not supposed to be that kind of a test, but yes, it relies mostly on patterns than aptitude. If you can understand patterns, if you can kind of just build a defensive strategy, you should be able to handle the test very well. Talking about strategy, the less the strategic nature a test has, the less you will be able to express yourself as an individual in terms of aptitude. So in CAT specifically agar dekha jaye, you are going to have 3 sections. We know that they are going to be timed as well. We also know that every section will have 40 minutes to it. Now of course there are certain advantages to this and certain disadvantages to this as well. The advantages are that initially, let's say for example someone is very good at a subject and that person sits and attempts that section for say 1.5 hours. Obviously this person has a higher chance of getting a better score than you at that particular section, but you always have to balance your score. So that's basically when percentiles might have got a bit lopsided. But CAT countered it by making it so rigid that you essentially have no scope for decision making or strategy implementation. So in this particular context, you have to attempt verbal at the very beginning, irrespective of whether you genuinely like doing it or not. You have to kind of attempt quant at the end in spite of you being very good at that subject. So ये क्यों हो रहा है, क्या हो रहा है, who decides this order? That is basically something that I think should change in some time. In terms of preparedness and being predictable, again CAT is very predictable. Everybody knows when it is going to happen, how it is going to happen, tentatively what kind of questions are appearing. RC आने वाला है, jumbled paragraphs आने वाले हैं, odd sentence out आने वाला है, paragraph summary आने वाला है, and we know that okay these are the question types that are going to appear. We broadly know how many questions are going to appear as well. So ये सारी चीजें मुझे पता है. Cutoffs भी more or less एक ही zone में hover करते हैं. So we basically know what is going to happen, right? So it's extremely predictable at this point in time. VARC, if you look at it, it's a very narrow spectrum VARC section. Now if VARC genuinely wants to give some support to people who are good at the section, then you should also have some technical aspects to it which include grammar, let's say, maybe vocabulary, let's say for example, or critical reasoning for that matter. Now it basically becomes a lot of abstract questions and you are basically trying to predict what the paper setter would have had in mind when they set the paper, and that is not something which will judge your VRC really well. In fact, if you look at most of the other tests, they will have a grammar angle to it, vocabulary angle to it, and critical reasoning angle to it, which CAT does not have. In fact, if you look at something like a GMAT as well, even there you will have single questions which involve critical reasoning and some amount of vocabulary in some other formats. Not talking about the GMAT, but yes, these kind of things can broaden the scope of VRC, which is not present at this point in time. I would also say that CAT is not the fairest of tests. A lot depends on which slot you are taking it in. A lot depends on how you are feeling on that particular day. A lot depends on how they decide to normalize. A lot depends on which kind of questions or which kind of sets are they planning to put. And if something happens like last year, wherein I was very vocal about the difficulty level of the test impacting the candidates' scores because there are certain theta questions. And if a section is so difficult that people are going going to find it very difficult to attempt it. And if I mark, let's say 2 as my theta answer and you mark 3 as the answer, and if it turns out to be 2, I'm purely getting 3 marks more than you because of luck. So these kind of situations can arrive because of theta questions specifically, and if one of the section becomes extremely difficult. So I would not say it's the fairest of tests. It's not a standardized test. It's not an adaptive test. So that is basically something that I would like to see in the near future. Now, talking about changes, the first thing that I would like to see is having no sectional time limits. I know that there are going to be some people who are going to take advantage of this and try to solve one section for the entirety of 2 hours or 2.5 hours. I'm okay with it. It's fine. As long as you are also coming up with the sectional cutoffs scientifically, which used to happen earlier. So before 2007, 2008, when there used to be no sectional time limits, even after that as well, till 2014, there used to be very broad sectional time limits. So even then, there weren't a lot of controversies in terms of someone taking undue advantage of a higher time duration provided to a particular section and then trying to muscle their way through it. It did not happen, right? People had to get balanced scores because someone who was serious about IIMs had to get those sectional scores. But then the sectional cutoffs were also slightly relaxed. So no sectional time limits might actually work and it might make it a bit more interesting. I would really like to see smaller DILR caselets or sets, because what happens in the current format and even some years back when there used to be 4 sets is that it's very difficult to figure out which one or two of these 4 sets are the ones that you need to bet on. So it makes it a game of lottery. Let's say, for example, in your particular test, the first set is the one that is the most difficult one. And after that, you look at the second set and you think that even this is difficult, you are going to get a bit confused. But in my case, if I get the easiest set, then I'm going to be at an advantage. Having smaller DLR caselets or sets, which used to happen, in fact, before 2015, there used to be these sets that used to have 2 questions, 3 questions, 1 question, 4 questions. So there used to be some variance in terms of the number of sets that used to appear at the test. I would like to see something similar happening in the near future, wherein there are smaller DILR caselet sets and there is more choice available to people, so that it does not happen that if you don't know how to solve one set, you are basically done and dusted. I would like to see an increase in the range of VARC questions. I would like to see some amount of grammar so that you can also say with certainty that, okay, this is the question that I'm going to be able to answer absolutely correctly without any doubt whatsoever. I would like a longer test, because 2 hours test, 40 minutes each section, it becomes a game of lottery. So the lesser the duration, the more it depends on luck. It's basically like any of the sports that exists, right? So if there is a long drawn test match, let's say for example, it will test your skill for a longer amount of time. Whereas if you are just dealing with a super over, you just have to play well for 6 balls. And then there is a lot of luck that comes into the picture. 2 misses go for sixes and you are basically winning. So that is something that I like. In the test format, it should be slightly longer than 2 hours. Sections can be slightly longer than 40 minutes. That is going to be my suggestion. And fewer slots. Of course, the 3-slot theory came into picture because of COVID. Before that, CAT used to be conducted in a similar format, but across 2 slots, and there used to be 100 questions that used to be present, but now we have 66 or 68 questions over the last few years. So I would like to see a longer test, a 3-hour test maybe. I would like to see more flexibility in terms of sectional time limits, and I would also like to see fewer slots, because that is okay. It doesn't matter how many slots you're taking it in, but in terms of normalization, I think dividing it in 2 groups is a fairer normalization process than dividing it into 3 groups. Because if you keep on dividing people into smaller and smaller groups, the normalization will not be very sensitive. Also, I would like one suggestion from my side, which is no calculator, because CAT introduced calculators from 2015, but there have rarely been instances wherein those calculators were going to be useful. So I see it mostly as a gimmick, but I would not really have that calculator in my setup. I would let go of the calculator because there are barely any people who are using it, and it's more distraction than anything else. I would also like to do away with theta questions, because we have seen what happens in tests that do not have negative marking scheme, visibly the CET. And a lot of people take gambles there, and if it turns out well, then you are great, you are doing well. If it does not turn out well, then even if you are a good candidate, you have to suffer randomly. So I don't really like the philosophy of theta questions. Either make everything theta, make them descriptive, fine. I'm okay with it. Of course, that should not happen in an aptitude test. But if theta questions are going to be there, then maybe do something about it so that either it becomes sweeter or it becomes fairer. That is basically the point. But I would make, I would like completely part ways with theta questions. I would like to see CAT becoming adaptive in the longer term. I would not really want CAT to be this test wherein everybody turns up, has the same set of questions, and again it depends on what you are comfortable with, as in it becomes a game of luck, right? Because if you are comfortable with something and that appears, then you are great, you are sorted. But if it doesn't, then you are in big trouble. Adaptive tests will put in effort before the test is delivered. They will make sure that the level of questions are already pre-decided, and that I think is a much fairer way of conducting a test. I would like to cite examples of a GMAT or even an NMAT, by the way. My opinion about NMIMS is different and my opinion about NMAT is different. NMAT as a test I really like because I think they have standardized it very well, and I'm not really wondering as to how my score is going to be impacted because of my neighbor. Now that basically goes out of the equation, and because of that I think that an NMAT or a GMAT are fairer tests compared to the CAT. Now that's basically what I wanted to say in terms of the current format of the CAT and the things that I expect to change over the next few years, if not this year. Let me know in the comment section, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think some of these changes make sense? Are there any other changes that you would like to have in the CAT per se? And if you are up for it, I will make a separate video in terms of how the admission process also needs to evolve for most of the top B schools. So I have some thoughts there as well. So stay tuned for that video. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like this video and let me know in the comment section your thoughts on this particular video.